What a cheery gospel lesson for a baptismal Sunday, right? I once heard a comedian talking about his day-to-day relationship with a significant other. Like many romantic relationships, some of the things that his partner did got on this comedian's nerves, and vice versa. In relationships, those things that are sweet and cute and unique at the beginning can become neurotic, narcissistic, or nerve-wracking down the road. Yet this comedian would not immediately say something to his girlfriend about her annoying behavior. Instead, he would wait, storing up the grievances like arrows in an archer's quiver. Then, when she came back from the bathroom saying, "Honey, you left the toilet seat up again," he would launch into his savings of offenses. "Well, what about last week when you made me stop watching the game? Or the other day when you left the dishes out for me to do even though I was the one that had cooked? How about that time you forgot to pick me up from the airport?" Of course, I have never purposefully saved up a wrong done to me so that I could hold on to it and hold it over somebody else's head. Ha ha, just ask my wife if I've ever done that. And I'm sure that you have never done such a thing as withholding forgiveness. Even though we do not need to hear it, living and forgiving in community have been the focal points of the last 2 Sundays' gospel readings. Last week, the text focused upon a path towards reconciliation. Point out the fault by yourself, with 1 or 2 others if necessary, and with the whole church if you must, so to ensure that the one doing harm knows their hurtful actions and might amend the relationship. Now today, we heard Peter asking Jesus, how many times do we have to forgive someone who sins against us? Up to 7 times? Now, at first, Peter's estimate appears either too high or too low, depending upon the relationship. There are some people we might click with from the moment we meet them. It would take a dramatic turn of events for them to need to seek forgiveness 7 times. We all also probably know someone that gets underneath our skin from the word go. They might rack up 7 offenses against us in an afternoon. Often, these are the people that we love the most. It has been said, if you would like a master's degree in forgiveness, get married. If you would like a doctorate in forgiveness, have children. Now, we experience forgiveness every Sunday when we hear the absolution after the confession of sins. However, forgiveness is not just something that we do when we kneel at church. This is a way of life, a daily choice that becomes more challenging the closer we come to other people, especially within community. When Peter throws out his question, he's asking more, though, than just, should we forgive people up to a certain amount of times? The original language comes across in a much more complicated fashion, depending upon one's interpretation of the number 7 within 1st century Hebrew culture. Should I forgive fully, or should I forgive others completely, are 2 ways of translating Peter's question. Another accurate way of posing this question to Jesus would have been, shall I forgive others always? Jesus' answer points beyond a base level of forgiveness. Instead, he exponentially multiplied the disciples' mathematics, not 7 times, but 77 times. For Jesus, rote forgiveness, or a limit to forgiveness, does not cut it. Those who follow his way practice holistic forgiveness. But how? How can we possibly forgive fully? This is where today's text turns towards a helpful, if a bit troubling tale. We have a king who holds a servant's debt that would make Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk's net worth look very, very small. The subject is in way, way, way over his head. So he begs for forgiveness. And remarkably, the king listens. Instead of going to jail, being required to work off the many lifetimes worth of debt, or being sold along with his family and all his possessions, the monarch acts graciously, forgiving the entire balance. not a sound financial practice by any means, but an infinitely generous offer. The servant must be elated, right? He has new life. Nope. Instead, he turns around and tries to get money back from those who owe him. And when some other servants catch wind of it, they report this double standard to the ruler. This is where the story gets a little bit sus, as the kids like to say. The king who was abundantly gracious is now lavishly vengeful, even torturing the wicked servant. A rough look if this king is actually to be compared to God. Now, most interpretations of this parable invite us to see four things. One, the king is God. Two, the servant is us. Three, God cancels away our insurmountable debts. And four, we are to practice the same sort of forgiveness. This is all well and good, but what are we to do with this ending that makes God look more like a petty, tyrannical maniac and less like an eternally forgiving Father? Well, to better understand Jesus here, we have to go back to the question that Peter asked in the first place. How much, how completely must we forgive others? Jesus illustrated in this colorful ending that the stakes are astronomically high when we withhold forgiveness from others. God has forgiven you completely. Now, how will you respond? This feels like a particularly appropriate question as we celebrate Nellie, Virginia, and William becoming members of Christ's body this morning in holy baptism. Hopefully you and these precious children and I respond by living into this newfound freedom that we receive in being forgiven. Hopefully we connect relinquishing another's debts against us with God wiping away our own debt. And hopefully we remember that these two aspects of forgiveness are forever intertwined. However, if we ever forget, all we need to do is pray the words that Jesus taught us. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. The measure we give will be the measure we get. But those words from part of the Lord's Prayer are from earlier in Matthew, and we say them every week during Holy Eucharist. In fact, this prayer is said in every Episcopal liturgy that we have. Anytime the church gets together, the Our Father is so important that we say it. Still, we may wonder, does God not forgive those who do not practice forgiveness with others? Hold on to that question while I tell you one last story. Two monks on their way to the monastery found an exceedingly beautiful woman at the riverbank. Like them, she wished to cross the river, but the water was too high. So one of the monks lifted her onto his back and carried her across. His fellow monk was thoroughly scandalized. For 2 hours, he berated his brother on his negligence in keeping their rule of life. Had he forgotten he was a monk? How dare he touch a woman, and worse, carry her across the river? What would people say? Had he not brought their holy religion into disrepute, and so on, and so on, and so on? The offending monk patiently listened to the never-ending sermon. Finally, he broke in with, "Brother, I dropped that woman at the river. Are you still carrying her?" We can scream at God and believe that God is the one that tortures us, but it is in not forgiving others' debts that we actually torture ourselves. As Anne Lamott has written, not forgiving is like drinking rat poison and then waiting for the rat to die. Put the woman down. Don't drink the rat poison. Practice forgiveness. I bet you didn't think you'd hear that sentence in a sermon today. Our task as Christians is to follow Jesus in the practice of loving one another. We practice this in how we choose to forgive each other. As we experience complete forgiveness through God's mercy, we too are called to lavishly, abundantly, and completely forgive others. We will not always get forgiving others right, and when you miss the mark, I hope you will have the mercy to forgive yourself. Do not store up a quiver full of grievances. Put that woman down. Don't drink the rat poison. Forgive as God forgives you. Forgive your parents, siblings, children, grandchildren, friends, neighbors, enemies, and even yourself. For it is in forgiving others that we ourselves participate in the freedom of God's mercy. And for that, thanks be to God.